Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Carrie Ann Royer. I am the Director of Training and Workforce Development at Families Together in New York State. Today's webinar is titled Facilitating Family Peer Support Groups, What You Need to Know. It's hosted by Families Together New York State and CTAC and presented by Karen Fuller, a credentialed FPA from the Q Center at ACR Health. So before we start, I have just a few housekeeping items to cover. Everybody has been placed on mute upon entry into today's webinar to avoid background noise. And we ask that you please keep yourselves on mute unless you are speaking, just to
We got
avoid the
paid,
background
but
noises.
now it's
And if you have any technical issues during the webinar, please reach out to our host via the chat feature and Vanessa will be able to assist you. We'll have a Q&A section at the end of the webinar, and we encourage you to chat in your questions throughout the webinar, and we will address as many as time allows at the end of the presentation. We would appreciate it if you would take a moment to fill out our brief feedback survey that will appear in the chat box at the end of the webinar, and let us know if you have any suggestions or topics that you'd like us to cover in the future. Today's recording and presentation slides will be posted on the CTAC website within the next 2 to 3 business days. And we are very excited to have Karen Fuller here with us today to speak to us about facilitating family peer support groups. Thank you for joining us, and I'll now pass it on to Karen to introduce themselves and get started.
All right. Just get the screen up.
Okay,
Okay, all ready to
there you
go.
go.
Okay, so thank you for having me. As Carrie said, I am Karen Fuller. I'm the family peer advocate at the Q Center at ACR Health that is located in Syracuse, New York. And so today I'm here to talk to you about facilitating family peer support groups. Um, And it does look like I did not choose the right screen. So bear with me. But yeah, so I'm here to talk to you about supporting running family peer support groups. And a lot of what I'm going to talk about today is coming from my personal experience running groups. So I will be sharing some stories, but I will also have several opportunities for you to share your experience as well. So we're going to get started. So our objectives for today are to understand the role of a facilitator and learn what skills facilitators should have and how to start and maintain family peer support groups. That's better. Okay, so um, we're going to start with understanding the role of a facilitator. So, a facilitator is a person who helps guide and manage group discussions and activities in order to achieve specific goals or outcomes. They act as a neutral party who promotes open communication, foster collaboration, and ensures that all participants are heard and their contributions are valued. So as a facilitator, it is our job to help members feel heard, gain insight, and learn coping skills. The facilitator should establish trust and structure, and provide a sense of belonging and connection with others. We could offer a safe and non-judgmental space for sharing experiences. And together we can work toward encouraging self-care and promoting resilience. Um, and there's a benefit to specifically to having groups run by family peer advocates, and that we're able to better connect with those coming to group because we have been on a similar journey as those attending. Um, so that often leads to a much deeper connection. And I know from a lot of the families that I've worked with that attend my group, and have attended some others that are run by like a clinician, they do say that they feel like they can be more open and genuine in my group, just because they know that I have that shared experience. Where when they're with a clinician, they're more apprehensive about sharing, getting really deep into how they're feeling or really being really open, because there's some kind of fear sometimes of, you know, what will this clinician or this person in this more, authoritative role think of me if I really share how I'm feeling. So that's something that us as being FPAs, that we can develop this connection with those in our group. Okay, um, so we're going to open it up now for people who want to share. What skills do you think that are important for a facilitator to have? So you can unmute and just share or put it in the chat.
Listening.
Very good.
Organization.
And Vanessa, I can't see the chat. So if you want to read, if
So
anybody.
we have a bunch in the
Okay.
chat. We have
Okay.
listening, empathetic, intuition, empathy, patience, compassion, uh, regulated, calm demeanor, respect, active listening, open-minded, organization, understanding the material you're presenting, authenticity, non-judgmental. These are all amazing.
Yeah,
The
they are.
ability
Really
to
good.
yeah, I like this one. The ability to redirect or bring back to the topic if group goes off course.
Oh, yes. That's a
A
really good
sense
one.
of humor,
Ah,
an ability to be quiet and wait, time management.
wow. Thank you for all those. They are great. So we are only going to cover a few of those, but some of them are ones that were mentioned. So the ones we're going to cover are awareness of your privilege and bias, listening skills, empathy, flexibility, and mediation skills. So we're going to kind of break these down. The first thing is privilege, right? A lot of times when people hear the word privilege, they think it means something that it doesn't. They think it means you've had an easy life, you haven't faced any difficulties or challenges, or that you come from a lot of money. But really, a privilege is anything you don't have to think about. And it's important to be aware of what privileges you hold in order to better support others, right? You have to be aware of what you have that others don't. Because if you don't do that, then that's going to interfere with any kind of support that you can offer. Um, if you've ever had someone talk to you about coming from a place of privilege, you can understand how frustrating that is. When somebody's just trying to give you advice or talk to you about something and they have no idea what you're actually going through or what it is like to not have, something that they take for granted. So you want to be sure that you're aware of what you have. Um, with that comes bias, right? Being raised in any type of culture, we hold bias. Some of those biases we are aware of, and some we don't know. But you should take time and do some reflection and get to know what bias do you hold and work toward, you know, um, fixing that, right? Because we don't want to bring our bias into the work that we're doing with other people, and that can be very tricky. But it's important that we approach care through a you know, without bias. Also, this was also in the chat, active listening. So listening to hear and not to respond. And part of active listening is active silence, meaning that we give space for the speaker to process their thoughts so that they can share more clearly what they want to say. So, giving that time, and sometimes silence can be uncomfortable, right? When especially you're with a group of people and nobody's really talking, that can be uncomfortable, but you want to be sure to give people the time that they need to respond or to share. Um, and then sometimes people just need a place to vent their frustrations. Um, they're not always looking for an answer. And I'm sure you can think of a time where maybe you were just venting and somebody's trying to offer you advice, and they can get really frustrating. And you might not know for sure, does this person, are they just venting? Do they need something? And you can always ask the individual, is this just you need to let off steam? Are you just, venting this out? Or, would you like some advice? Um, I know for me, uh, that's something I vent a lot when I get frustrated. That's the first thing I do, and I will announce to people. I'll be like, "I need to vent." But some people don't do that. I have a parent that comes to group every time, well, and things will be, she'll be under a lot of stress, and frustrated, and she'll start venting, and then other people in the group will start giving her advice, and, she'll end up turning everything down like, "No, no, that's not gonna work," and, primarily that's because she isn't really looking for an answer, right? She's just looking to vent that frustration out. Um, and then it's, important to um, take a moment when you're facilitating group to step back and let others respond, right? You are not the end all be all in the group, even though you're the facilitator and you're putting it together and you're organizing it so that people can get together. Um, all answers don't have to come from you. So you want to step back and give space for the other people in the group to maybe share their experiences with each other, and respond. So if one parent or caregiver comes to group and they're sharing, something that they're dealing with, you might know how you would handle it, but you want to give that opportunity for other people in the group to share that. And if nobody does, then maybe you can share your experience, but you don't want to be highlighting yourself during group, right? It's not the Karen show. So we want to be able to open it for, other people in group. And you don't always need to have the answer as a facilitator. That's another thing that was really hard for me to kind of know, realize for myself, is that I don't have to have all the answers. There might be another parent in the group that has an answer, or it might be something that I have to take time after group and, okay, go find the answer, right? But I don't have to have it right then and there. And again, that might not be what the individuals are looking for. Next, empathy, the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Um, so it's important to have empathy for those that attend group, even when the struggles that they may be facing may be different from yours, or it's something that you personally wouldn't have struggled with, right? A lot of times people will come to group, they're sharing their different experiences, and some of the things that they share, I'm like, well, that isn't a big deal. Well, that's not, you know, if I thought that way all the time, that wouldn't be very empathetic, right? Because it might not be a big deal to me. It doesn't affect me, but it's affecting them. And I need to think about how they feel about what they're going through, not how I feel about what they're going through. Um, but with that, it's also important to have boundaries. Um, you have to find that balance between being empathetic, and understanding and feeling for this person and what they're going through, and wanting to be this resolution for them, right? And solving the problem, or having the answers, and or kind of taking over, and kind of helping them through it, or doing the work for them. Um, you know, that can be very hard in the role that we're in, right? We're caregivers. We want to help people. So sometimes, finding that balance can be very difficult. So, but it's something that has to be worked on, because they're not going to get anything out of coming to group if you're always going to jump in and come to the rescue, right? The goal is to get them to where they need to be, and help them develop skills that they need to have. It's not for you to go and have to rescue everybody. Mediation skills, because sometimes conflict can arise, and knowing how to mediate and diffuse tension is a must. We are all diverse, and we come from different upbringings and backgrounds. And whenever you bring a group of people together, even when they share a common interest or experience, a disagreement or a conflict can arise. So, as a facilitator, it's important to know how to mediate a disagreement or conflict, and diffuse any tension between participants. Um, and in order to do that, first we need to understand the difference between a conflict and a disagreement. A disagreement is basically a difference of opinion, whereas a conflict, there's often some negative motivating feeling, such as resentment or hostility. Conflicts can arise when a disagreement is not settled. So, as a facilitator, it's our job to see and address any disagreement that may arise in order to prevent conflict. And part of that, I think, that can, you know, assist with this, to begin with, is having some ground rules in place, or some boundaries that you have. So, for instance, my group, back with the election, the previous election and the upcoming election, I know politics, which is something that they always say, shouldn't share, um, your you shouldn't discuss politics when you're in a group of people. And, that is something that comes up sometimes. And I want to make it a space where everybody feels comfortable. So when, it starts to get around election time, and I find that parents want to talk about um, the election and different things that are happening, what I did in the past and what I will do in the future is I will extend group a half an hour, and I'll say, okay, if you want to stay on and discuss, you know, what's going on with the election, you're welcome to do so at, the end of group. But during group time, we're only going to be talking about, our kids and whatever we're dealing with. So I make that boundary to begin with. So that can help, initially, um, keep any disagreements or, conflicts from arising. Um, but we're going to go in a little bit more to talk about um, some other tools you might use. But um, I want to open it up to all of you to discuss what are some mediation techniques you've used when you've been in a group of people, or if you've facilitated group before. So you could unmute and share.
Do have something in the chat that Meredith had put when you were talking about listening,
Yeah.
that I think is worth mentioning here. She has a mnemonic device that she uses, WAIT, WAIT, and it stands for Why Am I Talking?
Hmm.
I wanted to share something. I ran a leadership group And I like what you mentioned when you said if the facilitator does not have the answer, either you'll get back to them. But I did find that many of the peers that were on, my leadership group, amongst themselves, they found the answers, and that was so beautiful to see.
Yeah, that's something that happens a lot in my groups is that, if I just remember to step back myself and let them, talk amongst themselves,
Mm-hmm.
typically somebody else in that group will have the answer. So,
Yes.
yeah, it is.
It,
It's really good to see. So, anybody else have any mediation techniques you've used in a group when there's been any conflict?
I've tried to redirect and kind of like use a little sense of humor, like once the redirection has actually caught people's attention, and then we start talking about something else, and hopefully try to keep steering away from whatever has either triggered somebody or caused an issue or the complete.
Right. Yes, redirection's a good one. Um, I've kind of
Another
used that myself. Yep.
another good one is role reversal, just allowing the two people who have those different opinions to swap spaces. And like if I like green and you like blue, and we're like getting into why you like green and why I like blue, to just maybe switch it and say, okay, well, let's hear your point of view on what this person is saying, and let's hear your point of view on what this person is saying. And I find that once they step into each other's shoes, they begin to see things a little bit more differently. I'm not necessarily saying that they change their point of view or their stance on it. However, they begin to understand that there is more than one way to look at it. And what I usually do is just tell them to just step over 2 inches, like just literally step over 2 inches. And when you do that, you can see things differently because you see things from a different perspective.
Yeah, that's really good.
We have another one in the chat that says my main mediation technique is active silence. So she uses silence at first and then usually lets my kids run the group unless I need to step in. Usually they figure it out on their own and they can move on.
All right, great. Well, thank you. All right. So next we're going to get into flexibility. So willingness to change or compromise. Sometimes facilitating groups can feel like herding cats. And I will tell you, I've been facilitating support groups for almost 15 years now, and I have had anything and everything that could go wrong go wrong. um, and so it's important to be flexible because things will not go as planned. For example, you don't have the numbers that you expected, or the topic is not generating any discussion, or, the pizza doesn't show up on time, which is something that happens all the time for us. So there are many things that can happen when you facilitate a group. Um, but being able to go with the flow can help you feel less stressed and therefore make the group run smoothly, whatever is going on. And I'll tell you, I have had situations where I've had expected at least 8 to 10 people and only 2 show up, so maybe I have to rethink, how am I going to have this group, or is this discussion going to work with just a few people? So maybe I've had to change the topic, at the last minute. Or, with the pizza, like I also facilitate a group that's parents and caregivers and their kids. And even though I order the pizza, uh, and 2 hours before I want it delivered, and it still doesn't come on time, and then I have all these hungry kids, where is the food? I had to come up with, okay, well, let's see, what can we do for snack? But the biggest thing I think with this is, again, learning that, um, you know, I'm not that end all be all. It's not my fault. I can't control the universe. And people realize that. So even though I'm the facilitator of the group, right? If something goes wrong, um, for a long time I was like, if this doesn't go smoothly, or the pizza's late, or they don't like the topic, then people are going to think, they're going to blame me, or they're going to look to me as it's my problem. And it took me a long time to learn, wait a minute, no, I don't control the universe. I did my job. I called that pizza order in. I can't help what happens from there, right? Um, maybe the topic, maybe the particular people that came to group that day, that topic doesn't interest them. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with what I did for picking that. It might just be the people that come to group. Just that isn't a topic that interests them. So just that realization is that you don't have control over everything, and just that alone can help you kind of go with the flow and be like, yes, it's, things are going to happen. Have that, just be aware of that. Things going to happen. You can't be so rigid, especially when you're dealing with other people, because things change from minute to minute, hour to hour. You never know what's going to happen. All right. Next, we're going to get into the facilitator tools and tips for starting a group. Um, and Again, a support group is a group of people with common experience or concerns who provide each other with encouragement and advice. Support groups can be for many different things with many different purposes. Um, so let's talk about what types of support groups, or any type of group, have you engaged with, or have you held, or have you heard of? So again, if you want to unmute or put it in the chat, of types of groups that you're aware of.
I know there's literally almost a group for anything you can think of. There's AA, there's Al-Anon, there's groups for parents that have lost children, children who have lost parents. There's also groups for children who have parents that are incarcerated. I'm a family peer support here in upstate New York, and I run groups for parents that are dealing with children with behavior or mental health issues.
All right. Yep.
Well, the comments in the chat are smart recovery groups, grief, siblings, foster parent support group, parents of children with special needs, parenting groups, processing specific events, bereavement distress, grandparents raising grandchildren, teen adolescents, gambling, Hispanic women with depression. They're coming in fast, so if I'm missing any, I apologize. Parents, caregivers of children in community residences, Spanish caregiver support group, Bible study, sexual abuse,
Yes.
families for children with disabilities, codependency. It's a lot of good ones.
Yeah, so like was said, there could be a group for anything, right? You can get a group of people together with a common interest in anything. So so how do you start a group, right? What is your focus? So you want to think about what the overall focus will be. Will it be educational? So like some of those groups are educational focused. The goal is to teach something. Some groups are therapeutic. They're working on healing or recovery or processing an emotional event. Or there's social groups, right, that are just to help decrease the sense of isolation that individuals have. So when you're thinking about starting a group, you want to think, okay, what is that? What is the overall focus? Is it going to be educational? Is it going to be therapeutic? Or is it going to be social? And then, um, you know, the overall, outcome. What is that? Community building, skill building, or processing. Um, then you want to think about what is your target demographic. Are you hoping to start a group for parents and caregivers of children with that are on the autism spectrum, for instance? Um, you know, maybe you want to go further and say you want to have a group for parents and caregivers of kids on the autism spectrum with behavioral issues, right? Um, and then you want to figure out, will registration be required? So if it is something that's more educational, that might be a situation where you want to have registration required because maybe it's limited to a certain number of people. And you might have to keep track of more data, more information. Um, and or if you might have a second series or a continuation, you want to be able to have the individuals that attend, you want to have their information. So registration again might be a good option. Um, how will you welcome new members into an already established group? So my groups, I currently facilitate 4 different groups. Two, one of them is for parents and caregivers and their children. One of them is for um, just tweens, youth ages 10 to 12. And my 2 other ones are for parents and caregivers. Um, and so what happens is they're ongoing. So what I do is I meet with anybody interested in coming to group. I have a meeting with them first, and that allows me time to kind of go over the structure of group with them, what they can expect when they come to group. um it gives me the opportunity to go over the ground rules that we have for group. And that way they know what to expect. And when they come in, it's not so overwhelming. Before COVID, I used to do these groups in person. I do the the ones with youth, I do in person still, but the parent ones, I primarily do virtually. But when I was in person, early on, um, I didn't, we would just have group and we would have people show up, come to group. And sometimes, it'd be a really emotional experience for them. And I always felt bad because I hadn't made a connection with them. Other than they came in, they signed in, I said, welcome. We did our introduction, but I didn't get an opportunity to kind of really hear more about what they were going through or what brought them to group. So by now having it so I meet with them one-on-one beforehand, I'm able to know all these things when they come in and I have that better connection because I really hated when I would have group and somebody would come and they might, um it might have been a little overwhelming for them and then they don't come back. And I always felt like, they reached out and they wanted help, and they came to group, but yet, now they don't feel comfortable, so they don't come back. Um, and I don't I that's kind of what changed my mind. It was like, it would be better if I could make that connection initially. And then, thinking about, will attendees be required to attend every group? Um, so with mine, it's open. People aren't, there's no obligation. They can come as long as they need to. They can even come for a short time. I have parents that come in the beginning when they're first, dealing with what they're dealing with. They'll come in the very beginning. They might come every week to every group, never miss one. And then as things progress, they don't need it as much, so they might pop in here and there. And then, they might stop coming for like a year or more and then find that they need the support again and they start attending again. Um, but there are groups, especially I think with more educational based groups, that, you know, that requirement of having to come to every group is important. And I know that in our other programs at ACR Health, we do have groups like nutrition groups. We have our comprehensive adolescent pregnancy prevention groups. And those do require attendees to come for like the whole 6 weeks or the whole 8 weeks. Um, and oftentimes that comes with an incentive. So that might be something to think of too. If you are requiring attendance, is there an ability to have an incentive to offer people who to kind of motivate them to come to group? And of course, if there's basically a legal excuse like they're sick or something like that, fine, that's excusable, but you just don't want people to sign up for a group and then, decide, well, I don't feel like it today, right? And then especially if it ties in with some of your funding or something, and you're not meeting that numbers, though you don't want it to be all about the numbers, right? You want to be about the people that you're trying to help. You also want to think about, will the group have a set time period or will it be ongoing? So the overall structure, is it going to be open-ended or have specific runtime? And like I said, for the educational groups, you might need that finite endpoint. But if it's for general support, it could be an ongoing group. And when thinking about how long each session would last, you as in hours and minutes, you should consider things like how long it will take for everything to get started, like how to for introductions, whether or not you'll be serving food, and if so, and if um what part of the meeting will you be serving food? Will it be at the beginning? Will it be in the middle? Will it be at the end? You want to think about, would attendees benefit from some downtime before or after a group to kind of decompress, right? So you have to really think about not just how long are we actually having the group, but how long do all these other things factor in, and how long would that make then the meeting be? Um, Thinking about how often you should meet, would once a month be good or should it be more frequently? And what day or time would work best for the people you're trying to serve? Is there an option for more than one day or more than one time? Um, uh, but asking the people that you're trying to serve these questions can be very beneficial, and can lead to them feeling some ownership toward that group, which can then lead to better attendance. One of the things that I always do for my groups is I send out a survey to the parents and caregivers or to whoever I'm trying to support. What would work for you? What time of day, what day of the week works, and so I'm always asking for their input. Um, you want to think about where the group will physically take place. Um, will the people attending feel comfortable? Does the space provide privacy? Um, and is there enough physical space, right? We had one of the groups I had was in a very small conference room. Basically, the conference room had a large table and the chairs to go around the table, but you could not walk around the outside of that table. So it was very tight. That wasn't the best, space to have. It wasn't very comfortable. Um, and also, this is a good time to think about, looking at it through, um, you know, as far as abilities, right? So is there space for somebody that might be using a wheelchair or something like that? Are the chairs, um, you know, are they sturdy? Are they supportive? Things like that you want to factor in, right? The temperature in the room, even. You want to make sure that people are comfortable. Um, One of the things that happened with us is our group was we had one building for a while that had a lot of space. It was great. And then we moved to a new building that didn't allow space for me to have my parent groups. Because we used to have the youth meet in one room and the parents meet in another. And our new building didn't have that space. So I had to go find a new space to have group. I needed it to be near the where the youth were meeting, so it wasn't inconvenient. I needed it to not have a cost. So, I had asked for help from my supervisors, and one of them just said, "Well, we were down the street from Destiny Mall here in Syracuse," and they're like, "Well, why don't you just go meet like just in the open in the mall, where they'd have all the tables or whatever." And I was like, um, no, that doesn't give anybody privacy, and some of the topics that we're talking about, we don't want out in public. So, you have to think about that. And here's an example of somebody that wasn't really taking into account how it might be for people attending group. Another thing to think about is whether or not to offer a virtual component, and how to do that, right? So would you have, more like a hybrid situation? Do you have the technology to do that where everybody could be meeting, physically in person, but you have the screen, you have the camera and everything you need for that? Or would you be offering two separate, meetings? So one in person and one virtual. Um, so, like I said, before COVID, all of my groups were in person. And I traveled from each of the regions that we serve. So I was doing a lot of traveling. And then COVID hit and everything changed and we couldn't do anything in person. So we quickly came up with doing virtual groups. And in the beginning, I was initially like, I don't know that this is going to work. But I have to say that for me, it's worked very well. Um, that my but what I discovered was that where when we were in person before, the groups were 2 hours long. And now I don't need as long for virtual groups. So I offer two different times of the day for mine. So I have one in the afternoon and one in the evening. But I also had parents that really wanted that in-person piece. So I added in a in-person group as well. So I still have that. And one of the other things that changed with virtual um, versus in-person group was uh, when we were in person. And if you can just think of this, when you go into a new space and you find your seat, if you go back to that same place, chances are you're going to sit in that same place that you sat the first time you went, right? And if everybody that comes is doing that, sitting in the same spot that they sat the previous time, then you end up relating to the people that are closest to you, right? You don't really get to mingle with the whole group. And that's what would happen. I'd have parents come in and they kind of had their assigned seats, even though they weren't assigned. So they weren't really the group wasn't as cohesive. But when we switched to virtual and we're all on a screen together, I noticed that all the parents were really getting to know each other and they were really, really connecting. And it was something really great to see. And I don't think that, again, that's kind of a privilege of being the facilitator. I get to see that difference and I get to see people connecting. And so that's one of the things that did make an impact with me, seeing that people can those virtual groups can become really cohesive. Then you want to think about your group format. So, what will the structure of the group look like? Will it be formal? For example, people sitting around in a circle, around a table, one person sharing at a time, or will it be less structured? A topic's introduced and the conversation is just started, and then kind of goes from person to person. So again, when we were in person, the way my group was structured is we'd go around the circle kind of, either to the left or to the right, but it was one person talking at a time and you just went in order. Now that it's virtual, as a facilitator, I kind of guide where we're going to go if it doesn't go naturally, but oftentimes it just happens naturally. One person will share. I'll start the group and get that started. Um, but then one person will share, and then another person will pipe in and share their stuff or relate to what the other person says, and the conversation just kind of flows. If I see it's not flowing, then I will kind of facilitate that, and I might call on a parent or say, "Hey, uh, give me an update," especially if, the last week they were struggling with something, then I might ask, "How's that going?" Because I do have parents and caregivers that maybe, um they're not comfortable just kind of initiating, things on their own. They need that kind of somebody to kind of pull them in. And then I do have people that don't want to talk at all, which is fine, and I always give them that option. Um, so for like introductions, are you going to do a formal introduction and what's that going to consist of? For our youth, their introductions, I think they go over 5 things. I know they do their name, their pronouns, I think they do their age, they do a high, a low, and a hope for the week. I mean, their introduction very, very long. For the parents and caregivers, I just have them do their name, their child's name, age, and pretty much it. And then from there, I open it up for new people. So you know, again, it's that facilitating piece. Um, once I kind of direct, I start with one parent, I say, okay, and I'll call on that parent to do their introduction, and then I'll call each one out to do their introduction. But I always make sure that the last one introducing themselves is the new parent to the group. And then from there, I say, okay, as I explained to you when we met one on one, I allow new parents to speak first. So I open the floor. You can ask any questions you might have or share a little bit about yourself and what's going on. But I give them the opportunity, or I say, if you don't want to share, that's fine too. If you just want to listen, and I give them that space. But again, that helps the group go smoothly. And then how will you get your topics, right? What uh one of the things that I do, like I said earlier, is I do surveys. So I might send out a survey that asks, what are some things you'd like to discuss? But also, I think this is important for us as facilitators is to listen to what is being brought up consistently in groups. So if there is a topic that continuously comes up, um, I there was a time I was hearing a lot of parents, they and caregivers were talking about how they were dealing with their kids with some self-harm behaviors or some suicidal ideation. So what I did was I reached out to contact and I had a guest speaker come in to talk about suicide prevention. I've also had, I was at the beginning of the school year, I tend to have a lot of parents and caregivers talking about DASA and talking about, um, you know, bullying and issues at school. So I brought in somebody recently to talk about DASA, and explain how to, file a DASA complaint with the school and what that policy and procedure looks like. So just listening sometimes will help give you topics, but otherwise you should be asking, those that are attending. Um, and then getting the word out. Um, Are you going to do that through social media, tabling, word of mouth? For my groups, they were primarily word of mouth, is how I think even still the majority of the people are just hearing about my group, and then reaching out. Even though I do a lot of tabling, and we do a lot of social media. Unfortunately, I'm the oldest person at the Q Center. Um, and all the other my coworkers are all big on TikTok and they have us making TikToks. I've been on TikTok a few times. Not my favorite thing to do, but I'll do it, whatever. But yeah, so we get the word out that way. But you want to think about, what would work for the people that you're trying to reach? How are you going to reach them to let them know you're offering this group? Also, you want to think about having somebody to assist you in case a parent is triggered or a disagreement or conflict arises. So as stated earlier, we all come from different backgrounds and upbringings, and we all hold some type of bias. And therefore, sometimes when we get a group of people together, the disagreement or conflict can arise. So this is where having someone be there to assist you is beneficial. They can help diffuse a situation, or, in the case where a parent gets triggered by a conversation, they can either step in to facilitate the group while you step out with that parent, or they can or they can be the one that takes the parent aside. Either way. And this doesn't always have to be like a coworker or, another employee of your agency. This can also be a parent or a caregiver that maybe has been part of that group for longer. And that's kind of what I do. Um, in my parent groups, I've had parents that have been attending for years, and they kind of are the ones I lean on. So if I do need help, I know that, they'll take over, or they can, help redirect or do whatever needs to happen, so that if there's a conflict, I can deal with that, and they can continue the group or do what they need to do. So again, that could be helpful to have somebody, and then that takes the pressure off of you, right? So that you're not, having to have all the answers again, right? So uh, now if you have somebody assisting you, you've got another person that can come up with like topics and ideas. Maybe somebody that can also make observations or bring up things that maybe you're not seeing that's happening with the group too. um yeah. All right, so let's talk about, have you facilitated or attended a group where there was a disagreement or a conflict, and how was it handled, or what would you have done differently, or would you have done anything differently?
And is this a disagreement between the participants?
Yes. Yeah.
Not with you, facilitator, with one of the.
It, right. Nope, it's with the participants in the group. I can give an example. So I had a new parent come in, and so it was a disagreement between one of the parents that had been coming for a while, uh, and was further down the road than this other parent. The new parent came in, is still learning some stuff, and so they were talking about a particular product, and the new parent was using the actual name of the product, which the older parent felt was offensive. And immediately this parent the older parent kept saying, "Please stop saying that. Please stop saying that." And the new parent had no clue what was, "What do you mean? This is what it's called," kind of thing. Before I could even react, the other parent got up, she stormed out of the room, she was very upset. Um, so, I went out and, talked to her and kinda explained, that they're new, they're still learning, this is, it was just a miscommunication. I'm sorry that they upset you or and everything. And then I went back in and I explained to the new parent, same thing, like this is why they thought it was offensive and everything and realized, but it was a very awkward situation. So I think what I would have done in the beginning is because I saw that it was a miscommunication happening, right? And I didn't step in quick enough. And I think if I did something different, it would have been to immediately, when I realized the first time that the other parent said, please stop saying that, I would have straightened it out for the both of them and said that the new parent's using this product's name. Um, you know, so just stepping in a little sooner um is that's basically what I would have done differently. So does anybody else have an experience they want to share?
There's one in the chat.
Okay.
So the chat has, my organization is proactive by establishing rules of respecting each other, refrain from offensive language. And then somebody else said, I had two people whom did not like each other at all, had to separate the two, sit then in different spaces. It was explained to both that things have to be kept cordial between them while they're at group.
All right.
Would there be a difference in how you handle if it was like someone trying to take over the group itself? Yeah.
Had that. That's one of the things. So I have had in the years that I've been doing this, I've had some parents that have been very eager to like, yeah, almost like they're trying to take in. Um, and I just kind of try and have a talk with them, one on one about, I appreciate that they're invested and they want to, you know, that they're I don't know, that they're invested and that they have that interest, and I try and have them be maybe, give them opportunities to maybe even lead a group or, use that ambition somewhere else, but, again, respecting boundaries and keeping in mind that I'm the one that, is leading this group. I've had people, actually start coming to my group and get so excited that they went out and started their own group, but they hadn't been far enough in their own process that it was a good thing necessarily, and they've come back and been like, "Yeah, that was not a good idea," but usually I just try and have a conversation, one-on-one and like I said, utilize that interest, and in some other way. So whether it be, you know, letting them have if you wanna put a presentation together to put it toward group and take the lead on group, a different time, we could do that. If it's a youth, that kinda takes the attention away from what we're doing, again, that's another opportunity to kinda say, "Okay, is there an interest that you have that you'd like to present?" Or find kind of a special task for them to do. So it's kind of redirecting too, I think sometimes. Somebody has their hand raised.
Hi, Leslie here. I had a situation back at the beginning of COVID when we went virtual, and the organization I work for allows siblings, adult siblings, to join families in support groups. Wow, is that a big mistake?
Yes.
Holy cow. Yeah.
Yeah.
and it was really difficult because now we're virtual, and it's like I couldn't talk to either one of them, couldn't, you know, it was the sibling wound up just jumping off the call, and then I had to spoke to with my supervisors, and then I had to do outreach to both the sibling and the parent, and now they don't really allow siblings
Right.
to
Yeah.
join with parents.
In that case,
Yeah.
what might have been a good idea would be to start it off as a whole, but then separate and put in break rooms, siblings and parents. And
Just
that's a
as
big,
one sibling. Yeah, it was just
oh,
one sibling, so I
one,
couldn't do that.
oh, gee.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had situations. So um, but that again is why I try and do the one-on-one first before they come to group, because I'm like, because I've had other relatives come in too, besides parents and caregivers. I've had like grandparents, aunts sometimes. So kind of like to get a feel for what's to expect it. But yeah, it's hard when you can't meet everybody's need. Um, and but you also want to give space too, so people can share, you know, um when I have done one-on-ones, sometimes we get a call from a parent that will wanna bring their kid with them to the one-on-one, and I'm like, I'd really rather not, because I feel like the kids should have their space to talk to our youth coordinator, and I talk to the parents so that people can really share how they're feeling without worrying about hurting the other people's feelings or starting a conflict like you had, where the sibling got upset and just left. Um, yeah, it can be really tricky to try and meet everybody's needs. Kaveen, is that how you say it?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. I just wanted to share really quickly. We actually had a situation a couple years ago that I think is one of our staff handled very well. We had someone who we had two people, one that both were showing interest in like playing more of a leadership role in the group. But it went in two different directions. One person eventually, and still is, sort of like the facilitator's right-hand man. She will help to come up with ideas, structure things. She's very positive, sort of role model in the group, helps with making, calls sometimes to remind people about group. So that worked well. Then the opposite was a case where the person started sort of bad-mouthing the facilitator and like forming a group within a group.
Mm,
It was horrible. And I would love to know what your thoughts are. We ended up I had to step in as a supervisor to meet with this person. We tried to resolve it in person with the facilitator there, but then that person became very aggressive. And so we had to ask that she no longer attend the group. And it can be difficult, let's say, if you work in the area that you facilitate in and people know you in other ways. So it's very interesting how both scenarios worked out.
yeah, I had a similar experience. There was a time, so I had a group that I was working with, and it did get kind of clicky. So I actually had to I had to get coverage because I had a family emergency, and I had to get coverage. So I had one of my coworkers step in and lead that group, and the parents actually decided to leave and go. They went out to get coffee somewhere, so they were there for group. And when they saw that it was another it wasn't going to be me facilitating. I mean, so it's similar that they were like, no, and we're going to do our own thing, which was horrible. In that case, I had to, I talked to them and I said, look, I can't be here all the time, and you're gonna, that basically called them out. That's rude to do that. Um, but uh, yeah, I've had situations similar to that, like I said, with people trying to lead the group. But that's like you had to ask that person, basically not to come anymore. I mean, yeah, having to say maybe this isn't the group for you, or if you don't like the way we're doing things, you don't have to come. It's a choice. You're not being forced to come here. Maybe you don't want to be here. Maybe and if you know of other groups that same topic, maybe recommending them or saying, hey, check out this group. Maybe mine isn't the one you want to go to. That's another option. Chris Anderson.
I just wanted to share that I think a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, I think a lot of that speaks to like when you start the group, it might the idea it's going to be one thing, but it's really the people who come and turn and shape it. And so how that evolves, you're not always going to be able to predict, and that's okay. And you might end up needing to have more than one type of group because you can't meet everyone's needs in one. So just in terms of those of us sharing examples, for me, I originally had groups open to everyone, and we were working with a lot of people who were involved with child welfare and didn't have custody of their kids and were working to get them back, things like that. And I had a group that was almost half and half foster parents and biological parents. And frankly, that was a disaster because the biases of a lot of the foster parents were that these are horrible parents and we're saving these kids from when that's not the reality, and trying to understand the healing and working with families. So I mean that was just a tough lesson I had to learn. And goodness, it was an educational focused group, so it had a very short time period on it, and we were able to never repeat that again. But I mean, it's just keeping those things in mind. I think there's no one right way to do things, and you're going to learn all kinds of new and creative things. As for those of you who haven't done this a lot, as you go.
Yep, exactly.
But
And that goes back to that flexibility, right? It might not work. You're going to try things. They might not work. You have to be flexible enough to try something else and learn as you go. Yeah. All right. So another thing that's very important, self-care. Human beings versus human doings. So beings act from empathy and consideration for self and others. When we are on the human being side of things, we see the whole person in front of us, and we are actively engaged in our work with them. When we are on the human doing side of things, we get tied up on what we have to get done. We're disconnected from those we are working with, and we fail to see the people in front of us and everything they have going on. We get bogged down in the numbers and the data, and we may even forget the skills we have for working with others. We might find that we're annoyed or irritated with them. We know that people in our line of work tend to go through burnout, frequently, right? And the only way to prevent burnout is by doing self-care, right? And keeping on that human being side. Um, so we have to check in with ourselves often, right? And see where we are. Are we over on that human doing side, or are we over on that human being side? And I know for myself, I'd like to say I'm perfect. I'm always in the human being, and I never, get in that human doing side, but that's not realistic, unfortunately. And I have learned when I am getting to that human doing side. I have the signals now. I know when I'm getting there. When I find myself irritated with like a family member that I'm working with, if they ask something, and I'm like, oh, I'm like, okay, I'm getting to that burnout. I'm getting to that human doing. I'm losing that empathy. I'm irritated with them. So I'm like, it's time to step back. I do regular self-care. Twice a week I do water aerobics. I spend a lot of time at the pool, and I go to coffee with my friend. Those are some of the things I do. But sometimes that's not enough for me. Sometimes I'm like, okay, it's time to put in some PTO. I really need to take time for myself. And when I say I need to take time for myself, that also means with me, I'm like, I cannot work while I'm on PTO. I love the work I do. I love working with these families that sometimes I'm like, willing to take time off, but I'll have my phone on or I'll check my emails. And if a parent needs me, even if I'm not working that day, I will respond or I'll call them or I'll do whatever. So I've had to really, really start to think about, you know, not doing that. I've really had to try. It hasn't been easy. I'm like, I have to turn off the phone notifications. I have to, you know, put the email message that I'm not available and just leave it. Because I'm taking away from that self-care if I'm taking time off, but I'm still working, right? So I have to really make a point to be doing that self-care correctly and doing what, you know, and recharging because if I don't, then I'm taking away from the work I'm trying to do instead of helping people, right? I could be more harmful because I'll be missing some of the important things they might be sharing or, not giving them the support that they're looking for. All right, behind the scenes, you want to be sure that those attending group are getting something out of it. A good way to do that is to ask for feedback. So it's a good idea to send out surveys, maybe every quarter, and ask attendees their thoughts. You can check in not only to see how they feel things are going, but that's a good time to also ask for any, input they want to give, like any changes that they think they'd like made. You can even ask them if you're thinking of making changes, what they think about those changes. So, like I said earlier, I facilitate a group for 10 to 12-year-olds. And so had sent out a survey. When we started the group, we kind of picked a random day and a random time. I wasn't really happy with it myself. I was kind of like, this is a weird day. It's not enough time. It needs to be longer. Um, so instead of me just making that decision and changing everything, I sent out a survey to the families and I said, okay, what would your kids like? And I asked the kids as well, what as parents and youth, what works for you? What time of day? Um, what day of the week, how long do you want? And, it worked out well because thankfully they agreed with the day I chose and the time. So it worked out really well. And like I said earlier, when you do that and they have some say in the group, it can lead to better attendance. It can be again that ownership feeling of that they're more invested because they've made some of these decisions. It's also important to have some system in place to alert people. Um, oh, I'm skipping ahead, I think, to to alert group attendees to any upcoming events or changes in the schedule. So, one of the things that I do is I use the Remind app. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. It's an anonymous texting app. A lot of schools were using it. I guess they've gotten away from it now, but I still use it. And what that does is it allows me to send an announcement to all the parents and all the different groups, all the parents and caregivers and all the different groups I have, all at once. And then I have it set up so it's not open for the parents to chat or see anybody's conversation. It's literally, I send them a message, it goes out to everybody at once, but if they respond to that message, it only comes directly to me. It's an anonymous app, so nobody sees anybody's information. But it's very convenient. I can go in, I usually the last week of the month, I set up the reminders for, the month we're entering. I pick the day, the time, so that I don't have to look at it again. And the only thing I don't like about that particular app is that it limits the characters you're able to use. Um, so what I've discovered is I've just made flyers that have all the information and I attach it, to the announcement. I put a little headline like, parents night out is whatever date, and then see flyer for information, and they've got all the information there, and it works out really great. Um, it's been really helpful, and especially if something comes up, a snow day or whatever. I have a way to communicate with everybody that isn't a huge email list. It isn't a bunch of phone calls. It's just a real quick app. And again, when I meet with with parents and caregivers, initially, that's something else I go over when I meet with them one-on-one is I have the app and I kind of instruct them and this is how it works and I have them download it. Um, and there is an option if they don't want to download it on their phone, they can get it through email also. It just works a little differently. So, yeah. And then you also want to think about any record keeping that has to be done. Are the attendees expected to do an intake? Um, and what information on that intake? Of of course, if you have different grants and different funders, what data do they want, right? Um, so that should be stuff that's on that intake form. And again, all the people I work with, I have their intake information. I have the data that I need for my funders. But again, that helps with communication. It helps because then I have their other information if I need to connect with them, urgently for something and I don't want to use Remind, I have all that information. And then if you're taking attendance, right? And what is that going to look like? So originally when we were meeting parents, in person, it was obviously they signed in. And then once we switched to virtual, I was signing people in. But now we've even moved forward again. We've recently discovered Microsoft Forms, and we have everybody sign in electronically, and it keeps it in a spreadsheet for us. So, can think about some of those. And then keeping a summary, do you want to keep a little summary of what's gone on and or maybe from that, do you want to make a little newsletter to kind of entice people who maybe haven't come to group what topics have been discussed at group? For me, I keep a summary after every group. I write a little bit about what each parent shared and then an overall of what the group focus was. And then lastly, you want to keep any cost involved. So is there a cost for where having the group held? Is there going to be a cost for any food or activities that you're going to have? So you want to think of all that too. There's a lot of places you could meet for free, so that's one good thing, but there's usually some type of cost involved. All right. All right, so you'll all be getting these tip sheets with you, the facilitator tip sheet and the facilitator tips for starting a group. So I'll just go over them real quick. First, know your role as a facilitator. Help guide conversations to be sure that all members are heard. Be aware of your privilege and bias. Acknowledging these can assist you in being a better ally for others. Be an active listener. Give members space to share and know that you don't have to have all the answers. Brush up on your mediation skills. Knowing how to handle a disagreement can prevent it from becoming a conflict. Aim for empathy. Provide a safe, non-judgmental space for sharing experiences and building natural supports. Be flexible. Sometimes things won't go as planned. Being able to go with the flow can lead to far less stress. Find your focus. What demographic are you hoping to support, and what is the goal you want to achieve? Time and location. What works best for the people you are working to support? Group format, remember to give members a voice. This includes everything from the space you're in to the flow of the meeting and the topics to discuss. Assistance, having an extra set of hands can be super helpful for when things don't go as planned. Self-care, taking time out for ourselves to recenter and refocus helps keep us present for those we are working with. And behind the scenes, consider data collection, costs involved, and how to get the word out. Most importantly, ask members for feedback. So that's all I have for you. Thank you very much for having me and dealing with my technical difficulties at the beginning of the presentation. I apologize for that. I'm usually way better at this. I don't know what happened today.
Thank you, Karen. It was wonderful. We do have a couple of questions that I took note of that we can go over. Is group for everyone? Are there situations in which a person may not be ready for a group dynamic?
Oh, absolutely. I mean that again, that's kind of the benefit of me, like when I meet with people one-on-one, some people are not ready. I've had parents come and meet with me, and then I don't see or hear from them. I've had people almost go a year before they come to group, but at least I've made that connection and they know it's there. But sometimes, and some people do come and they try it and it isn't for them, but at least they've given that a try, you know? But yeah, it's definitely not for everybody.
Thank you. Another question is, can you give some examples of questions for feedback? I facilitate a drop-in type support group for parents.
Okay, so some of the questions are what do I usually ask? So you want to double check like the day and the time. Is that working for you? Um, are there any topics that you'd like us to have? And then, like I said, find maybe guest speakers. If you don't have that knowledge, look to other resources, look to other agencies. That's a great thing about being an FPA is that we have this whole wealth of different agencies and different places, and I have pulled several FPAs to come in and talk to my group because the just different skill sets that I don't have. So you know, um, ask them if there's anything that they'd like to change with the group. And ask them what is going well, what they like about the group, what are they getting out of the group. That would be another one.
So another question is how to handle what feels like a closed dynamic where a new person may find it hard to join because dynamics are already established.
Okay, so that's exactly why I decided to do the one-on-one because I didn't want people coming in and not and feeling that like they weren't included. So if you're not able to do that one-on-one, maybe taking time if you have a break during the group, like sometimes you'll give like a little coffee break or a restroom break, going over and talking to that individual. And then one of the things I do too is that pulling when I'm doing a virtual group, kind of directing the conversation and making sure that everybody has a chance to speak. Also another idea that I've been trying to establish is you as a facilitator kind of have the advantage. You get to know everybody at the group, right? So maybe this person's story and that person's story connects to that person's story. So kind of making those connections that can help too. And maybe having other people, if you do have people that have been in group for some time, um, having that role of like a kind of a welcome committee type person that can kind of, sit with you, sit with the new people, kind of get them acquainted and involve them.
Thank you. Um, how do you handle people oversharing or using bad language?
That is a very, very difficult one. So, oversharing, you have to kind of reel them in and remind them. So, what happens is I will step in and I'll say, okay, let's bring it back. We're talking about this. Or this is, maybe this is something you and I need to talk about after group. But I think that for now we're not, this isn't the place to be sharing this much. Kind of bringing that in, kind of reeling it in. Bad language, just again, repeating, making that a rule in the beginning. Sometimes you even have to refresh at the start of group. You might have to go over those boundaries. So uh sometimes when I see it seems to be, instances of that happening, somebody using bad language or somebody oversharing, then I will make it a point that we stop and we kind of go over, okay, the guidelines again, these are the rules for group. Yeah.
Okay. And how can you know if you as a facilitator might need to take a break from the role?
Um, I think that, knowing where you are with that burnout, and if you're not feeling the reward of the group, like, I would say, so what I mean by that is if you're facilitating a group and it feels more like work than something you enjoy doing, that you've lost that connection with the group, then maybe it is time to step back. But you have to know yourself. I think that's the most important. You have to be able to to have that insight to yourself and know, you know, when you've had enough. And sometimes it might just be a manner of, yeah, you need a break for a short time, but maybe you need a break overall, and then looking for somebody that would want to take it over. So because it might be hard to step back if it's something that you're known for and something that you've kept doing. It might be, but if you at least can say, well, this person might be a good replacement for me, that might make it easier in a way because you had some hand in that. Yeah.
Okay. And somebody was asking what the app that you were describing is called.
Remind.
I'm just going to share my screen quickly and just okay, so some upcoming events that CTAC has is on January 19th from 11 to 1. We'll have a webinar on the role of YPAs in residential settings. And on January 25th from 12:30 to 3:30 will be trauma-informed approaches to crisis and de-escalation in youth and families. And there's 3 continued educations credits offered. Hey, so I want to thank Karen for a wonderful presentation as always, and thank everyone for your time and attention. As a reminder, today's recording and slides will be available on the CTAC website within 2 to 3 business days. And Vanessa will be sending a link in the chat box so that you can complete the brief feedback survey, which you'll also receive in an email in case you are not able to complete that at this time. And on behalf of Families Together, CTAC and Karen, we thank everyone for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.